Novella. Novella? 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 They all sound wrong now. I didn't like it. Mistborn, The Secret History in the novella. I've listened to it in between The Bands of Mourning and before going on to The Lost Metal. And in general with Brandon Sanderson's novellas, in the Stormlight Archive, it's not essential to read them, but it's interesting and you get little nuggets and greater depth and understanding behind the world and nice little Easter eggs. And with the Skyward series, Brandon Sanderson, those novellas were stunning. And I actually enjoyed them just as much as the first two main stories, and maybe even better than the final two books in that series. But Cosmere related or not, with his novellas, they always have a good plot, a good story within themselves, as well as fitting into a bigger picture of the series that they're linked to. But with Mistborn Secret History, the novella, it didn't feel like a book at all, not with a proper cohesive plot. So from now on in the video, it's going to contain big spoilers, both for Mistborn Era 1 and 2, so definitely stop watching now to avoid any spoilers. So with this book, Kelsier is alive! Woo! This book is basically just going through moments in Mistborn Era 1 and showing us how Kelsier was actually involved at various points. I know that Brandon Sanderson has said that he had thought this up while he was writing the series so that it wouldn't feel as disjointed, but it does just feel shoehorned in and totally unnecessary, and it totally diminishes what the characters did in Mistborn Era 1 and takes away from them. It's saying Kelsier figured that out first and actually did that first before the person in the canon of the book. But it's not like we were missing anything the first time round, so it completely felt unnecessary. I mean, I really hated it because what Vin did in gathering preservation into her, oh, Kelsier did that first and randomly gave it up to Vin afterwards. And with Spook, what he did in getting the message, putting the message in metal to Marsh, that was Kelsier behind that. And then the bravery and heroism of Marsh, it diminished that a bit because they're saying that Kelsier sort of manoeuvred him into that position, and it did just feel like it was spoiling it a bit. When we thought Kelsier had died, it created more of a mystique, a mystery around him, and he was always the one with the plan and the secrets, but this sort of destroyed that whole image of him for us. There was no great mystery about how he survived. It was all rather prosaic and banal. Instead of having a big idea and plans, he was just stumbling onto things as they came up. And let's not even talk about that whole long stage of the book where he was just stuck in the Well of Ascension prison by himself. That sort of laid him bare as a character and made us realise that there wasn't as much to him as we thought. He's not actually that special. What was so great about him before was his charisma and his ability to have one big problem and break it down into smaller chunks and gather a crew around him who had specialist abilities and talents and delegated the specialisms to those people who were experts and could figure out those parts of the plan. And it was the camaraderie and trust and banter and humour and warmth of that group of people all together that made it so special. So to have so much of this book of Kelsier just by himself just showed us how much he as a character comes up short. It also sort of destroyed the character progression and growth he had by the end of book 1, by the time of his death, where he had sort of mellowed a bit towards his attitudes towards nobles. And in the book canon, when Doxin was worrying about what Kelsier would think of him there ending up being a noble as king, and we as readers thought, oh, Kelsier would understand because of everything that's happened and because of how much he'd grown by the end and would have continued to grow with them and the team. But here we have him separate, sort of knowing bits of what's going on and being really angry about it, and it didn't sit well with me. And every moment where we saw him intervening in the canon story of the first trilogy, it just felt so shoehorned in and unnecessary and stealing the thunder of those characters completely. And we never got to see what we truly would have liked, which was to have him interact with those people who he used to know. He never got to speak to Doxin again, for example, and him finding out about Doxin's death was just, oh. But also he moved on very quickly from that, so we didn't really get the full weight of what he would have felt And the book ended with him having a conversation with Sazed/Harmony, asking him if it was possible for him to come back, as in to the physical world, because he's just in the cognitive realm at the moment. And Sazed saying that no, there wasn't a way back, but Kelsier knew he was lying. So Kelsier, after that, in the 300 years since, was obviously going to find a way to come back into a physical body, and that's in the end of the Bands of Mourning. I assume he's succeeded in coming back to the physical realm. And Spook could hear and see him, so I'm wondering if he and Spook sort of collaborated and experimented with hemalurgy, and I wonder if that black book that Marsh gave to Mercy and then passed on to Wax, whether that was really Spook or whether it was Kelsier and Spook had written it down, all about the hemalurgy. And if Spook knew about Kelsier and was in communication with him in the cognitive realm, then did Kelsier get to speak to Breeze and Ham as well? Because Spook would have been in communication with them all the time in the period directly after the Cassandra, is it called? The bit with the Eerie also felt a bit pointless. And as a whole, the book just was disjointed and just felt repetitive, because we'd already known these events from Mistborn Era 1 and was just going through different bits, inserting Kelsier into them. I think it was meant to seem like Kelsier was manoeuvring people and that he had a plan, but it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel clever or cunning. It felt like he was a different character almost. He lost his voice and his personality that we had grown to know and love. But he's obviously been brought back for a reason. I hope it's a good one and that it fits really well and isn't just tagged on. So I'm really looking forward to the Lost Metal now. If you enjoyed this video, please consider watching the first pinned video in my profile, which explains all about my neck, what I'm having to go through every day and why I'm having to fundraise for life-saving neurosurgery. And maybe even consider donating to my fundraising page, gofundme.com/SaveJenny. Thank you.